When my wife chose another man, I thought my world had ended. Little did I know that betrayal would be the spark that reignited my life, and led me to someone I never expected. Leaning back in my chair, I took a moment to survey the room, my thoughts tangled in confusion. Surrounded by so many incredible women, I couldn't help but wonder, why did Mark Lavalier choose my wife? And why did she agree? Why did Linda decide to leave me just as our children were growing up and gaining independence? We had been planning for this phase of our lives, discussing how we'd spend our time once the kids were no longer at home. Not long ago, I'd briefly considered how our relationship might change when that time came. I'd assumed we'd finally have more time to talk, reconnect, and grow closer. But suddenly, it hit me, Linda's plans for the future might not include me at all. I felt like a complete fool, and that fleeting thought ignited a frustration that quickly turned into raw anger. It must have shown on my face because Dee, sitting across from me, looked worried. "You okay? You look like you're about to do something really stupid," Dee said cautiously. Behind her, at the far end of the dance floor, 4 attractive young women were sitting together, their laughter blending with the upbeat music. I couldn't help but glance in their direction and wonder, why didn't Mark Lavalier pick one of them instead? After staring at the group for a minute, a sudden, uncontrollable laughter escaped me. The laughter was so loud and intense that everyone at our table turned to stare, clearly alarmed. Other customers in the restaurant began to glance our way, curious about the commotion. I laughed so hard that tears streamed down my face and I couldn't seem to stop. When I finally caught my breath, I felt a strange mix of relief and sadness. Later, I found myself at the hotel reception, informing the staff that I would be moving to a suite. The receptionist gave me a curious look as I requested that under no circumstances should my wife be allowed access to my room. I also insisted that no one inform her of my presence at the hotel, should she ask. With a slightly puzzled expression and a smirk, the young woman at the desk assured me that the staff would follow my instructions. I took the key card and headed to my old room to gather my belongings. Without a second thought, I packed up everything of mine while tossing all of Linda's clothes and possessions into a pile. That evening, after the commotion had settled down, Samantha invited me to join her and her friends at their table. A surprising gesture, considering they had agreed earlier to keep the group exclusively female. One of the brunettes at the table teased Samantha about breaking the rule, her playful tone softening the mood. For a brief moment, I felt almost normal again, like I could pretend that everything hadn't just fallen apart. I offered to buy a few bottles of champagne for the group, just to lighten the mood. Samantha gave me a warm smile and said, "I'm not sure, but a deal's a deal." As we were chatting, we spotted Mark Lavalier leaving with my wife. Samantha pointed it out, adding that neither of them even glanced in her direction. Curious, I turned to Christy and asked, "What did you tell them?" Christy explained that earlier, a woman had been mustering up the courage to approach us, but Christy had quickly intervened. She made it clear to the woman that Mark and my wife were vile personalities, who had betrayed their friend, effectively sending her away. Smiling, I couldn't help but feel a surge of gratitude. "You really made an impression on me. Should I kiss you as a thank you?" I joked, trying to ease the tension. Samantha didn't miss a beat. She grabbed my head, looked me in the eyes and said, "You won't have to." Then she leaned in and kissed me. Later in the shower, things heated up between us. I pinned Samantha against the wall and she wrapped her legs around me. Holding that position wasn't easy, but the overwhelming pleasure made it worth every effort. It was one of the most passionate experiences of my life. Samantha had already laughed out loud twice, making quite a bit of noise. When we finally got out of the shower, we realized that our passionate encounter had woken up the other women in the house. Despite their hangovers, they seemed surprisingly cheerful. They ordered room service and started sipping cocktails, joking around as if nothing unusual had happened. Christy, noticing the playful mood, teased me from across the room, saying, "Don't even think about it, go take a shower." I just laughed, grateful for the lighthearted atmosphere. A bit later, Linda finally showed up, looking slightly disoriented. After taking a quick shower, she came downstairs and asked, "Jim, where are my clothes from last night?" I kept my tone calm and replied, "I think they're still in the hotel room where you left them. I didn't bring your stuff home." She looked surprised, like she was about to scold me for not paying attention, but then stopped herself. It must have dawned on her how ridiculous that would sound. I looked at her seriously and asked, "Why did you do that, Linda?" She didn't have an answer, just stood there, struggling to come up with something that made sense. Meanwhile, I was focused on moving forward. I had already started renovating the house, dividing it into 2 separate spaces. On the left side, where the new kitchen would be, I'd installed a new door. The kitchen was set to be opposite the living room, while the study had been turned into a third bedroom. On my side, the dining room became another bedroom, and the renovations made both sides of the duplex look nearly identical, except for Linda's side having a separate garage. When the work was finally done, I reassured the kids that their new rooms were ready on the right side of the house, hoping it would ease their minds during the transition. I couldn't help but feel a mix of relief and sadness as I adjusted to this new version of our lives. I was giving the kids a tour of the left side of the newly renovated house, showing them around while Linda thoughtfully carried their bags to their rooms. As we moved from room to room, I could see the surprise on their faces. They were clearly impressed by the spacious layout and how different everything looked. Once we had explored the house, we gathered in the living room on the right side. That's when Tommy spoke up, sharing his concern about the living room feeling a bit small. I could tell he was trying to process the changes just like the rest of us. In the midst of all this, memories of my recent time with Samantha flashed through my mind. We had spent those days soaking up the sun, and I couldn't help but notice how much more vibrant she looked with a deep tan. I had memorized every detail of her amazing figure. On Tuesday, when I drove her back to her apartment, she kissed me deeply at the front door. "Would you like to spend another night with me?" Samantha asked, her voice warm and inviting. I smiled, though a bit reluctantly. "I would love to, but you have classes tomorrow. Please call me before you go to bed. I'd love to hear your voice before I fall asleep," I whispered with a soft smile. As we sat across from each other at a small cafe, I reached out and took her hand. Samantha looked at me, her eyes soft, and wrapped both her hands around mine, giving a gentle squeeze. In that moment, I felt truly connected to her. Later that evening, back at the house, I found myself sitting with Linda, feeling a sense of heaviness settle between us. I knew that what I was about to say would hurt her, but it had to be done. I looked into her eyes and knew that there was no turning back. "Linda, it's too late," I said quietly, my voice filled with sadness. Her eyes widened and she looked at me, confused. "Too late for what? What do you mean? What's going on?" she asked, her voice tinged with despair. Taking a deep breath, I confessed, "I found someone else." Linda pulled her hands away from mine as if I had burned her. The shock on her face was unmistakable. "How could you do this? How could you break my trust like that?" she whispered, trying to process what I just said. I looked down, feeling a pang of guilt. "Linda, you used me. You took advantage of my love and loyalty. But now I can't stay because I've lost that love. I'm going back to my place. I still have a lot of work to do at home. I'll be back for dinner with you and the kids, but please don't bother me until then." I got up and walked out, leaving Linda crying behind me. The weight of our parting hit me like a wave, and for a moment I wanted to turn around to hold her like I used to. But deep down, I knew our relationship could never go back to what it was. Later, Emma approached me, her voice small and uncertain. "Why can't you just forgive Mom?" I looked at her tenderly and replied, "To forgive her would mean betraying myself. But we're still a family, Emma. We may be facing tough times, but that doesn't change who we are." I explained that I wouldn't be sharing a room with her mom anymore. I reassured her that we would still be there for each other, no matter what. After hugging Emma and reminding her that I loved her, I returned to my own space in the house. Gradually, this new routine became familiar, and despite the pain, I knew I was making the right choice for myself. I still kept my routine of leaving for work early in the morning, long before the kids were up. It gave me time to clear my head and focus on what needed to be done. As I was getting ready one morning, Samantha gently touched my shoulder, but then quickly pulled her hand away, sensing my tension. She quietly left, not wanting to stir up any emotions. I wasn't planning to upset Linda by openly showing that Samantha was becoming a bigger part of my life, but I couldn't deny it to myself anymore. Thoughts of Samantha were constantly on my mind, while my concern for Linda's feelings was fading. It dawned on me that Samantha had become more important to me than I'd initially realized. Over time, Samantha started spending more and more time on my side of the house. Eventually, Tommy and Emma began to follow her lead. Tommy even moved his bedroom to my side, and Emma, who had always been closer to Linda, found herself gravitating towards Samantha as well. It was like Samantha had become a central part of our lives without me even planning it. Tommy, now more confident, soon started dating a girl from school. The girls who used to flirt with him lost interest once they met his new girlfriend. As for Samantha, she made some wonderful new friends, and it made me happy to see her surrounded by people who brought her joy. I was careful to make sure that Linda never came to my side of the house, not wanting to complicate my growing relationship with Samantha. However, as time went on, things began to change. A few years later, Samantha graduated from college, and we ended our romantic relationship on good terms. I could see it in her eyes during Susan's wedding, which we attended together. The age difference between us was becoming more apparent. Samantha deserved to experience life in a way that didn't revolve around my baggage, and we both knew it. During that same period, an incident happened that left me puzzled. One night, while at the club, a group of women sitting at a nearby table left around the same time that Mark Lavalier vanished. Dave's friend didn't notice how Mark left with the group, but it became a topic of speculation. Later, a photo surfaced showing Dave's friend with his girlfriend at the club, with Mark Lavalier talking to a group of wives in the background. At first, the wives adamantly denied being there, insisting it was all a misunderstanding. But after seeing the photo and facing persistent questions, they eventually admitted they had been present at the club. However, they swore that nothing inappropriate had happened, despite the rumors swirling around. Time moved on and life continued to change. Mark suffered a tragic accident that left him disabled, unable to walk. Meanwhile, Linda's fate took a different turn. The last real conversation Linda and I had about our relationship took place on the day Emma left for college. By that point, we were already divorced. I had rented out my side of the duplex and moved to a small house by the sea, looking for a fresh start. As Emma was loading the car, ready to begin her new life, Linda approached me in the driveway. She hesitated for a moment, looking more vulnerable than I had seen her in years. "Jim," she started softly, "can we talk?" I looked at her, unsure of what to expect. After all we'd been through, I wasn't sure I had anything left to say. But something about the way she looked at me made me pause, and I knew that whatever came next would be important for both of us. "I can't stop loving you," Linda said, her voice trembling. "I made a huge mistake and I regret it every single day. I just can't move on and I don't even know how to start." Her words hung in the air, heavy and filled with a desperation I hadn't seen before. But despite the sadness in her eyes, I knew that I couldn't let her back into my life. I just nodded, unable to respond, and without another word, I climbed into my convertible and drove away, eager to get home and put some distance between us. Life had changed in ways I hadn't expected. Just last week, Samantha had left her job in another city and moved in with me, marking the start of a new chapter. Since then, she had shown me in countless ways how much she valued having me in her life. Trust was a beautiful thing, something I hadn't truly felt in a long time. As for Linda, according to the kids, she never started a new relationship. They told me she seemed lost in memories of our once happy family, stuck in the past. Sometimes she would send me long, rambling messages, apologizing and reflecting on what went wrong. It was clear that she hadn't moved on, but I couldn't let myself get drawn back into that spiral of regret and confusion. Meanwhile, a new story was unfolding in my life. I had met Maria, a fascinating woman originally from the island of Terceira in the Azores. Her father, an American technical sergeant, served in the meteorological service at Lodges Field Air Base, while her mother, a local librarian, had met him there. Their love story was one of those unexpected connections formed through the comings and goings of military life. Maria had traveled a lot as a child, following her father's assignments around the world. At first, Maria and I didn't have much of a connection. She seemed distant, maybe a bit guarded. But over time, I noticed a change. We began to share more conversations and slowly I started to see beyond her reserved exterior. There was a loneliness there, but also a deep love for her daughter, Katrina. The moment I met Katrina, I felt something I hadn't in years, a sudden, overwhelming sense of warmth and affection. In my previous life, I had always been a bit restrained, even with Linda, and we never had children. But with Katrina it was different. She captured my heart in an instant, and I couldn't help but feel protective of her. One evening Maria and I were sitting together after Katrina had gone to bed, and out of nowhere Maria broke down. "I'm Catholic," she whispered, wiping away fresh tears. "You know I can't get a divorce. I can't marry you." Her words took me by surprise. Marriage? We hadn't even discussed that, and I felt foolish for not realizing how deeply this was weighing on her. Maria collapsed onto the floor, her body shaking as she sobbed. For a moment I just stood there, unsure of what to do or say. I wasn't expecting this kind of confession, and it left me at a loss. Eventually, her crying slowed, and she seemed to drift into a restless sleep right there on the floor. Gently, I picked her up and carried her to the bedroom, laying her carefully on the bed. I wiped her tear-streaked face with a damp cloth, and as she stirred, I couldn't help but notice a few stray tears slipping from her closed eyes. Sitting beside her, I felt a strange mix of tenderness and uncertainty. I didn't know what our future would hold or how to navigate this new relationship, but I knew one thing: I couldn't just walk away from Maria and Katrina. They had become a part of my life and I wasn't ready to let go. I saw the glimmer in Maria's eyes and realized they were tears of joy. She looked at me with a mixture of relief and love. "Billy," she whispered, her voice trembling, "I don't care what happens, I love you. I just want to be with you. I can't live without you. Katrina is counting on you too. Please show me your love now," she begged, her words filled with longing. Our love was undeniably strong, but Katrina's presence made us pause and reflect. We knew we had to have a serious conversation about our future. Surprisingly, despite the tension, a smile broke through on Maria's face. We talked openly and honestly, and before long I found myself moving in with her, ready to start this new chapter. But life didn't stay peaceful for long. One evening, I found myself hunched over the toilet, feeling as if my insides were being torn apart. My emotions had finally caught up to me, and the pain was almost unbearable. I stumbled to my office, poured a small glass of Oban and downed it in one gulp, then poured another and another. I kept drinking, hoping it would dull the ache in my chest. Eventually, I snapped out of it. I stopped pouring, slowed my breathing, and tried to collect my thoughts. The anger that had been eating away at me was now a frozen, solid mass in my chest, suffocating me from the inside. It felt like a destructive force, one that could tear me apart if I let it. It wasn't until years later, when a beautiful 4-year-old girl entered my life, that the darkness inside me began to thaw. That little one brought light into places I thought would always be dark. For the first time I felt hope. However, there was still a nagging suspicion buried deep in my mind. One day, while dealing with some computer issues, I had an idea. I shared a made-up problem with Maria, telling her that I had to reinstall the email program and that it was now set with an empty password. I casually mentioned that she'd need to enter her password next time to access her mail. I knew Maria well enough to be cautious. She had a habit of changing her password regularly, and I couldn't help but feel like she was hiding something. When she wasn't around, I copied the archived email file onto my laptop and opened it, bracing myself for what I might find. As I scrolled through the messages, my heart pounded. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I realized that all this time, I had been nothing more than a tool to her, a piece of convenience used and discarded when it suited her. The realization cut deep. A few days later, something unexpected happened. Marcia, a woman I'd known for years, had just come back from San Antonio. I caught her as she was getting ready for work and asked, "Baby, could you do me a favor? I have an envelope with some tax documents and a bank key. Could you swing by my place during lunch and pick it up?" Marcia agreed without hesitation and asked where to find the key. I told her it was under the pillow in our bedroom. After she left, I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling. On a hunch, I decided to clean up the trash around the house. In the kitchen, I casually pulled out an empty beer can from the trash, adding it to the kitchen bag. Then I went to the bathroom to tidy up. That's when I spotted something that made my blood run cold, a used contraceptive in the bathroom trash. My mind reeled, piecing together fragments of suspicion, and I knew I couldn't ignore the truth any longer. I had to face the fact that both women, Maria and Marcia, had been playing me and I had been blind to it. It was time to confront the reality I'd been avoiding for far too long. I discreetly tossed the used contraceptive behind the toilet and the bathtub, making sure it would take a thorough cleaning to find it. I didn't want to deal with it just yet, and I needed time to process what I had just discovered. As I gathered my thoughts, I took the emerald brooch, a valuable piece worth around $55,000, and carefully wrapped it in one of his handkerchiefs. I slipped it into the bottom drawer of the closet, tucking it under a pile of sweaters. I knew it would be safe there for the time being. My mind was racing with everything that had been happening lately. Glenn had recently come into a large sum of money, about $500,000 in an IRA account. On top of that, the net worth of my house in Evergreen was estimated at around $700,000. Leaving behind my successful career as a crime writer also weighed on me. My career had been lucrative, with 4 novels already contracted, 2 of which had received advances. One of the books was in the final stages of editing and was set to be published in a few months. I couldn't help but think about my silver BMW M6 coupe sitting in the garage. It almost felt like I'd missed that car more than anything else. It was a symbol of the life I once thought was perfect. Growing up, I had always admired guys like Diego, the fearless, cool types who seemed to have life figured out. I was the opposite, a skinny, bookish kid who idolized their boldness. I tried to imitate that bravado, but I could never quite pull it off. I was 23 when I finally ventured out of my comfort zone, standing at the end of a long line, waiting to attend Comic-Con in San Diego. I had traveled by train from Los Angeles, surrounded by over 100 people dressed as their favorite characters. It felt liberating, a signal that I had finally grown up, at least in some ways. Despite my responsibilities as a father, husband, and full-time worker, I never completely let go of that part of me. Sometimes I would still dress up as Zorro just to feel that spark of freedom again. Once, I even tried to surprise my wife by wearing the costume during an intimate moment, but her laughter completely killed the mood. Some might say I was immature, but honestly I took it as a compliment. Who really wants to grow old and let life's pressures crush their spirit? I held on to that part of myself as a reminder to live a little. Then one Tuesday morning, something unexpected happened. My new home security camera alerted me at work around 11 a.m. There was someone at my front door. Curious and a bit uneasy, I checked the camera feed on my phone and saw that it was Charlie. After my wife let him in, they both disappeared inside the house. I froze, my mind racing with possibilities. Why was Charlie there? I hadn't expected him to come over, and it wasn't like my wife to invite guests while I was at work. My stomach knotted with anxiety as I sat at my desk, staring at the screen. Part of me wanted to rush home and confront them, but I knew I needed to stay calm and gather more information before jumping to conclusions. I couldn't help but feel that familiar pit of dread in my stomach, the same one I had felt when I first started suspecting something was off. I just hoped I was wrong this time. I quickly informed my colleagues that I was taking my lunch break and hurried out of the office, my heart pounding. As I drove home, a storm of emotions flooded my mind: anger, betrayal, confusion. I didn't know how to handle the situation, but one thing was clear: I needed to proceed cautiously. Charlie was a big guy, physically strong and intimidating. The last thing I wanted was to get into a confrontation that would end badly for me. So, instead of storming into the house, I decided on a different approach. When I spotted Charlie's car parked in front of my house, I couldn't help but feel a surge of anger. Acting on impulse, I punctured all 4 of his tires. I knew it wasn't the smartest move, but it gave me a fleeting sense of satisfaction. I thought about barging in and confronting my wife right then and there, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. The fear of breaking down in front of her held me back. I had already shed enough tears in private, and I wasn't about to lose my composure now. So, instead, I drove around the block a few times to calm down, trying to collect my thoughts. That evening, as if nothing had happened, my wife casually mentioned that she was planning to go to a Halloween-themed bachelorette party with her friends on Saturday. As she spoke, I felt a sinking feeling in my stomach, a sense of inevitability. I couldn't deny it any longer: our marriage was falling apart. Despite knowing this, I couldn't shake the desire to hold on to the hope that maybe I was wrong. The next day, my frustration finally reached a boiling point. I couldn't stop replaying the image of Charlie walking into my house. When I saw him again, I lost control. I charged at him and delivered a solid kick to his ribs, hard enough that I heard a crack. He doubled over, gasping for breath, and I didn't let up. I struck him between the legs, making my intentions clear: he wouldn't be getting near my wife anytime soon. While he lay on the ground in agony, I pulled out a black permanent marker from my pocket. With my left hand, I drew a large, bold letter Z on his forehead. I knew it was childish, maybe even stupid, but in that moment, it felt oddly satisfying. The marker was indelible, and I figured it would take him at least a week to scrub it off completely. Of course, it didn't take long for the situation to escalate. A few days later, I received divorce papers and a restraining order. According to the order, I had to stay 500 feet away from my wife and her lover, Charlie. The one silver lining was that since she earned more than I did, I wasn't required to pay alimony. Due to her frequent business trips, I was granted primary custody of our teenage children and had to pay a small amount of support. Despite everything, I couldn't shake the guilt of not informing Charlie's wife about the affair. She deserved to know, but by the time I considered it, it didn't seem to matter anymore. Charlie and my wife had made their choice, and I had to focus on picking up the pieces of my own life. People started jokingly calling me Don Diego, referencing my impulsive act of marking Charlie's forehead. It was a small, silly victory in the grand scheme of things. Reflecting on it all, I realized that the past year had been one of the most challenging of my life. Not just because of the divorce, but also because of my father's sudden passing from a heart attack at the beginning of the year. I had been in the process of taking over the family construction business when everything fell apart. Losing my dad and my marriage within months was overwhelming, and there were days when I didn't know how I'd get through it. But life didn't stop for my grief. I had responsibilities both at work and as a father. Despite the chaos, I knew I had to keep moving forward. And somehow, amid the heartbreak and the chaos, I was determined to rebuild my life, even if it meant doing it from the ground up. I still remember that phone call like it was yesterday. I was on a business trip when my phone rang, and seeing my mother's name on the screen didn't prepare me for what came next. Her voice was shaky as she informed me that my father had suffered a heart attack. The news hit me like a punch to the gut, and I felt completely powerless being so far away from home. After my father passed, everything seemed to spiral. One of the most painful changes was losing touch with Millie, my daughter. Initially, I was granted custody and saw her twice a month on weekends. But as time went on, the visits became less frequent, often rearranged to suit their convenience rather than mine. No matter how many times I reached out to make plans, there was always some excuse, another reason why it just wasn't possible. Eventually, I grew tired of trying to force it. I decided to let them take the lead, figuring I'd just wait for them to reach out when it suited them. At the time, I didn't fully understand what was happening, but looking back, it's clear that Angela was deliberately creating a distance between me and Millie. That realization left me feeling both helpless and furious. What angered me most was knowing that Angela had been actively driving a wedge between us. I had always tried to keep things civil, but it became clear that she was manipulating the situation, subtly influencing Millie to see me as less involved. It hurt more than I could put into words. Around the same time, my professional life was dealing with its own chaos. My company had just missed out on a major contract for constructing houses and retail outlets in a newly developed area. The project required a massive supply of building materials, and I had hoped our company, CCS, would secure a substantial order. But that didn't happen. Word spread fast about who won the contract, and soon enough, a CCS salesperson contacted us, offering to provide materials at a competitive price. As soon as he started his pitch, I interrupted him. "We don't work with CCS anymore," I stated firmly, cutting him off. I wasn't in the mood for negotiations. When he left my office, I could see the frustration on his face. Not long after, Angela stormed into my office, furious. Apparently, the news that I'd refused to work with CCS had reached her. "Do you realize what you're doing?" she snapped. "You're deliberately sabotaging Steven's business. Not only do you refuse to work with him, but now you're spreading rumors about him to other companies. It's disgusting." Her anger caught me off guard, but I kept my cool. "Angela, most people already know what happened between you, me, and Steven," I replied calmly. "If they choose to do business elsewhere, that's not on me. I'm just running my company the way I see fit." She looked at me, still fuming. "You're just being spiteful," she accused. I shook my head. "If you have nothing else to discuss, please leave," I said, refusing to engage further. It became clear that Angela wasn't just upset about business. She was angry that I wasn't quietly fading into the background like she had hoped. I wasn't going to let her rewrite the narrative of what had happened between us or manipulate me into staying silent. It was moments like that when I realized just how deeply I had been dragged into a situation I never wanted. Angela's attempts to control both my personal and professional life had to stop, and I was determined to regain control of my own story. I hadn't eaten yet, but hunger was starting to set in. I figured I'd get something once things settled down. When Millie finally got home late, she looked exhausted and went straight to bed. I busied myself with unpacking our luggage, sorting through clothes and souvenirs from the trip. Once I was done, I joined her in bed, feeling the weight of the day finally catching up to me. The next morning, we had a simple breakfast together before heading over to Angela's place. Angela seemed a bit sullen, but she listened attentively as Millie eagerly recounted stories from our vacation, how we explored new places and shared little adventures. It felt good to see Millie so animated, even if Angela's mood didn't quite match the atmosphere. Curious, I casually asked Angela about Steven's whereabouts. Her expression tightened and she replied, "I have no idea, Dave. He asked me to mortgage the house to save his business, and when I refused, he left in a rage. He hasn't come back since." I couldn't help but feel a strange mix of vindication and pity. Steven had pushed his luck too far, and it seemed like his own reckless decisions were finally catching up with him. I didn't know where he had gone or what he was planning, but one thing was clear. His life was unraveling and Angela was stuck dealing with the aftermath. In the back of my mind, I couldn't help but reflect on my own journey. After all the chaos and heartbreak, I finally felt a sense of closure. My primary goal had been to get justice for my family, and I had succeeded. The truth had come out and the person responsible for our pain had been exposed. For the first time in a long while, I felt at peace. I could finally sleep at night, knowing I had done what was necessary to protect those I loved. But one question lingered in my mind: could Stephen Collins say the same wherever he was? Did he find peace in his choices, or was he haunted by the mess he had created? I doubted I'd ever know the answer, but it didn't matter anymore. I was moving on, focused on rebuilding my life with the people who truly mattered.